Dot, 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 dot. Good morning, everybody. I faked you out. I post live stream and then I pull it down, then I put it back up. So thanks for sticking with us. We actually got our stream correct and we're ready to rock. How are you doing this morning? I don't want to wake the family. How are you doing? I hope you're doing fantastic. I am having a blast this morning. I've got a little bit of a message this morning, not a big lesson, just a big message. And lately this week, I've really been stirred by some things that I just want to share with you. But before that, you know we've got other news on how AI is finally beating humans at debate. We're actually going to show that. And imagine the eons, the billions of years to the beginning of life on Earth to AI that is beating humans at debate. Come back with me, if you will, to the beginning of time. And there are some pretty new discoveries and a study that's kind of showing where life more likely came from on Earth. We're going to cover that. And before all of that, you know what we're going to do. We're going to cover a cup of gratitude. I want to hear in the comments. You know it. You know the routine. Post in the comments what you're grateful for. Let me know the thing that's stirring you this morning that you're excited for in your life. Start your day with gratitude. Be grateful for the things around you. Be grateful for the income. Be grateful that we have the technology to meet with one another like this. Be grateful this morning. What are you grateful for? This morning, I'm grateful for poetry. That's right. I'm grateful for poetry that stirs the soul. I was reading a piece of poetry and I am going to share this with you. We'll actually end with this, but the pop quiz is, what do wise men, good men, wild men, and grave men all have in common? What do wise men, good men, wild men, and grave men all have in common? We're going to answer that at the end of the show. So we're going to do that, but let's talk about other news. Here we go. Oh, kid tested negative this week, so he can compete. So he can't compete in the... Oh, kid tested negative. Okay, kid tested negative for COVID, so he can compete in the meet this week. I assume, what is that, Lisa Welsh? Where did you post there, Lisa? Trying to see where Lisa posted there. I'm pretty sure that's her. Bam, kid tested negative. That's something to be grateful for. Your kid loves to compete, I believe, if I recall correctly. So, yeah, that's Lisa Welsh. Bam. All right, thank you for sharing what you're grateful for. Let's talk about other news real quick. So, AI, yes, can now beat humans in debate. Recently, well, not recently, over the last 2 years, they've actually been testing this brand of artificial intelligence as to whether or not artificial intelligence could actually craft an argument and beat humans in debate. And the idea goes, if we can at least compete with humans in debate, we'll actually, even though we acknowledge that there's humans, right now there's a big thing called the Turing Test. And the Turing Test is a test to see if basically someone conversing through text or through a robot can fool the human into believing that they are human. And this is a very high bar for artificial intelligence or robots. Can these pass the Turing Test? Can it fool humans, that humans believe that it is another human? Now, the Turing Test is kind of going away because we've kind of accepted robots and AI for what they are. So the next level is, can they actually, how smart are they? So I think humans aren't as, at least in the developed world, it's not about faking being a human. In fact, if anything, there's a creepy factor to that. But can they show enough intelligence to form an argument and win an argument? Well, yes. Project Debater has a computational argument technology, an AI technology that has performed very well recently. Now, typically AI and humans go head to head in the world of gaming. And it's very rare that this is in the world of logic, especially there's something unique about humans in our logic. We think logic is supreme and we think that we can bring a superior logic. And in debate is meant to kind of create parameters for this so that the best logic wins. But the truth is that we can form a logic for anything. And as humans being creative in a debate, we can often actually get very creative in the way we shape debate. So debate is actually very artistic as well. So lately, this AI was given several debate opponents, and it had to abide by the rules of the debate. If a debater has 15 minutes to prepare a opening speech and topics and counterpoints and points, the AI was given the same amount of time. It rifled through several thousand gigabytes of information in that amount of time, logged it, formed an opening statement, as did the human opponent, and then point and counterpoint was then delivered through a robotic female voice. Now, the system, though it was quite often beat by humans, nearly 8 or 9 of its opponents actually conceded their positions, specifically on the topic of telemedicine and its efficacy. Now, does this mean empirically that AI can beat all humans at debate? No, of course not. But this active debate then goes into the database that the AI has been studying, and now it makes it smarter. And every new debate makes it a more powerful debater. And so, law of exponents, this AI should be able to beat nearly every human debater, probably within the year or next year. So again, I present for your imagination and your mind's eye to see the origin of our planet, the origin of our universe, and then what we're about to talk about is the origin of life on Earth and the full arc of 4 billion years, how long it took us as humans to actually actively and effectively debate each other and share ideas. And then from the moment we invented AI, roughly, the idea of AI has been around for many, many decades, but actual useful AI only within the last 15 or 20 years. And then in a single year, we invent an algorithm to debate, and that will then surpass all of our knowledge and all of our abilities to debate within the next year or two. It is just mind-boggling. Here's the link to the article. I would say that, no, the jury's still out. It's not empirical that AI can beat us just yet, but it's definitely an impressive feat. And that leads us to the other piece of other news. How did life start on Earth? You know, we deal with all kinds of light topics here. We deal with small business. We deal with mission. We deal with the mission of the heart. We deal with personal development. We deal with bookkeeping. And we're just going to, throw this in here today to tackle how life started on Earth. So a new study finds that there's more empirical evidence that life on Earth started, you guessed it. Did you guess it? By lightning strikes. So scientists in general agree that life on Earth was highly dependent on the amount of phosphorus in active components. You see, for the longest time, scientists believe that phosphorus was actually brought to Earth by meteorites. But we're finding now that lightning and the sheer volume of lightning might have actually supplied the Earth with enough phosphorus to support the emergence of life. Phosphorus is a vital building block, and it's been known to actually give rise to the double helix model, DNA and RNA, which were the building blocks of basically any living life on this planet, from grass to mammals, anything with a DNA strand that we can genetically decode depends highly on phosphorus. Now, a particular mineral, schreibersite, I hope I'm saying that right, is a highly reactive element and produces phosphorus capable of forming organic molecules. And the idea has been, well, meteorites might have brought enough phosphorus, but the pace at which we see meteorites striking the Earth, we don't see nearly enough schreibersite or phosphorus to actually support the start of human life. And so they started calculating the phosphorus generated in lightning strikes. And the phosphorus generated in lightning strikes could produce between 110 to 11,000 kilograms a year. And they ran the math and realized, well, lightning strikes produces enough phosphorus, and phosphorus itself can become schreibersite over time. And schreibersite basically makes phosphorus reactive enough to create DNA and RNA and other organic materials. So scientists are starting to really lean towards the idea that what we call life on this planet actually came from a simple spark of lightning, or millions upon millions upon millions of billions of sparks of lightning. Now, why did I bring this story to your attention? Whatever your theologies are, whatever your ideologies are about the origin of life on this planet, I thought it was fitting to talk about how life gets sparked. And I love State of the Spark and igniting lives of explosive significance. And this is where this imagery comes from, not necessarily the start of life on this planet, but the start in the ignition of the life of the soul. Let's talk about losing hope and good rage. So when Marissa and I were doing development work, we came across a model. And this model of humanitarian development was known at the time, the Geert Hofstede model, named after the scientist. I believe his name was Geert Hofstede, if not a team of scientists called Geert Hofstede. They came up with a model, 5 components to define a culture. And when you engaged another culture, you were bringing several paradigms, several key important paradigms. Now, there's tons of paradigms. There's tons of cultural isms and idiosyncrasies. But they found that there were 5 key pillars to a culture that you should be aware of about your own culture. And you should be aware about the culture you're entering and how it differs. And it's made to be reflection points that as you have more and more cross-cultural encounters, you can reflect on how those are going in order to develop empathy and understanding with the culture you're engaging. Those 5 are power distance, how far a culture feels they are from the influence of power. The second pillar is individualism versus collectivism. Is it prided in the culture to be a staunch individualist, or is it prided in the culture to be more of a collective, to be part of a community? Masculinity versus femininity. Is it a matriarchal society, a patriarchal society, or some of the, non-gender aesthetics of masculinity and femininity? How does that culture lean? That's the third. The fourth is uncertainty avoidance. How much does the culture avoid uncertainty or welcome uncertainty? Are we okay? Are we okay with uncertainty, or do we wrestle with it? Does it mess with us? And last but not least, the 5th pillar is long-term thinking versus short-term thinking. Now, why am I bringing these up? Because I began to ponder countries that express depression, that express malaise, that express ennui, if you will. And what we find is that countries that are in transition with no clear direction on these 5 pillars often show a depression society-wide. And as I was reflecting on our own culture, our own society here in the United States, and a lot of the highs and lows I see, I pondered, how happy are people really? So I researched this a little bit. And what I found is that only 13% of the population report being passionate. That means that approximately 87% of the population would say they don't live a passionate life. There's another model out there called the Happy Planet Index, and Marissa and I love this one. It's an alternative to GDP, gross domestic product. How, a lot of our countries like to rate, a lot of our governments like to rate countries based on their GDP. Basically, how productive are they? How much money do they produce for the economy, GDP? And the Happy Planet Index said, this is insanity. Why are we rating countries and societies this way? So the Happy Planet Index came up with its own metric. There's a great TED Talk on it. We'll share it another time. Fun fact, the happiest country in the world is Costa Rica. And right behind that for the longest time was Bhutan. And I believe I believe it's Bhutan who actually measure their country based on the Happy Planet Index. But I believe Bhutan has actually shifted, and Costa Rica is still in the first position. So if you compare Costa Rica to the United States, you can see some stark contrasts as to why our society exhibits a much higher depression, much higher sadness, much higher loss of sense of hope than many other countries. And no, we're not just talking about COVID. We're talking about life in general. Let me give you a link right here about the Deloitte study about passionate people. Let me just give you that right there so you have it. So I began to ask myself a question. How do people ultimately get depressed? How do people lose their sense of hope? How do people lose their childlike passion? How do people lose their ferocity for taking a bite out of life, for making an impact in the world? Because I know that most young people, even if it's coming through the Insta life, they want to live an Insta-worthy life. Those people, for all of the critique we could have on keeping up with the Joneses there, they at least have an appetite for being alive and living. But many people that I talk to, the older they get, of course, you and I know the cliche that they lose this sense of passion. They lose the ferocity for living. So what causes this? Really quickly, number one, I believe the lack of sense of power, empowerment, the opposite of empowerment. If you lack a sense of ability to improve your life for a long enough time, for a sustained period of time, you get rebuffed by life. I believe you lose a sense of hope for your own goal achievement. I believe in narrow worldview. If you believe that it should be a certain way, a very narrow worldview. Life should be like this. Our population should be like this. Keep those immigrants out. Politics should look like this. Gun rights should look like this or not like this. The school system absolutely needs to be this or that. Narrow worldviews over a sustained period of time, I believe, constantly cause people to lose hope. Their negative energy comes back to them, and you could call this the law of attraction, but people who are negative Nancy's, people who say, oh, well, you got to figure this out, or you got to know this, or if you're a dreamer, don't you have all the answers about everything under the dream? And if you don't have that, should you even be talking about your dream? These negative MFers who really bring you down. Call it law of attraction, call it negative energy, but I believe that people who have this worldview that you have to have it all figured out before you put intentionality into the world. This is the third major reason that everyone around them and they themselves begin to lose hope. Lack of love, lack of self-love, and lack of encouragement. We talked yesterday. If you are a dreamer, hold tight to your dream and encourage yourself and encourage those around you to dream. And if you are not a dreamer, and you know that, but you're surrounded or near a dreamer, you need to encourage them because they are fragile, because they go through life being rebuffed in their dreaming day in and day out. The world around you, entropy alone, let alone negative Nancy's and attitudes around us, drag us down, and it causes us to use every piece of psychological reserve we have to stay positive. And in a negative world and in a negative trend, the dreamers lack encouragement. If you lack courage, if you lack self-love, you need to put that out and you'll get back. And number 5, simply loss of sense of self. It's a noisy world out there, and whether it's the Insta life you're following or the 35 TikToks you reviewed last night, you're comparing and you're asking yourself, is this me? Is this me? Is this me? Is this me? And it's almost like too many options are causing us to lose a sense of self. What is it I really want? I've been asking myself this lately. What is it I really want? And I must beware. I must be careful that I return to my dream board, as Brittany has shared, returning to her major definite purpose. Have you sat down recently to renew your dream machine so that you don't lose your sense of self? Who are you? Are you losing yourself in your kids? Are you losing yourself in your marriage? Are you losing yourself in your business? Are you losing yourself in your place in society? In the weeds that all these things can produce. I mean, these things, family and marriage and business, these things are all good. But are you losing your sense of self? I call this the entropy of the soul. So why am I talking about this? I'm stirred. For those of you who come back to the show time and time again, for those of you who are making an impact in the world, for those of you who are coaches, trainers, for those of you who are real estate agents who just want to make an impact in people's lives, for those of you who are small business owners who are literally just trying to use that as a medium, and you started your business back in the day, You started your service-based business or your lawn mowing company back in the day. And you started it with an idea that all I have to do is serve people well and I will encounter enough people to impact their lives positively while still feeding my family. But it's been years now and you think you're just a lawnmower, or you think you're just a doctor, or you think you're just a real estate agent. Let me encourage you. Rage against the dying of the light. The title of today's show was What is Good Rage? I think good rage is raging against the elements of entropy in people's lives. I believe we should be zen. I believe we should be balanced, of course. But I believe we should prick our own souls. I believe we should ignite ourselves to the next level until we are almost irritated at our core at entropy. You see, I think that it's not someone standing across the room coming against your goals and saying, I disagree. I think you're wrong and I don't think it's going to work. If someone came at me that hard, someone I loved came at me that hard, I would know that they were drawing a line in the sand. I can't have you in my life anymore because you're fighting for these dreams. I wish for that. Instead, what I think the true enemy of dreams is a low-key entropy, a neutrality. I'm not really sure that's going to work. I don't know about this or that. How many people around you would you wish they would push you and shove you and say, if you keep dreaming, get out of my life? That would be such a clear black and white that you could take action on it and then start owning who you were. It's the neutral. It's the entropy. It's gravity. It's resistance, as Stephen Pressfield has said time and again, resistance. It's a low-key, faceless, nameless dulling of the senses. And I want to encourage you, rage against the dying of the light. So all I'm going to leave you with today is this, the poem by Dylan Thomas in the 1950s. And this is kind of odd. When was the last time I gave you a good poem? I think you know this line, do not go into that gentle night, but let me share it with you to encourage you to be the 13% who bring passion into the workplace, to encourage you to be the less than 13% who are willing to go the distance and stand for who you are and stand for gray area, stand against the neutral gray and push people to be black and white in love, in kindness, but stand clearly for who you are. It goes, do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. The wise men at their end know dark is right. Because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late. They grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight. Blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father and friend, there on the sad heights, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. I hope today that you go out and you fight mediocrity tooth and nail. I hope you bring fervent passion to what you do today. I hope you bring love and kindness to your world. Brittany says this, Find Your Why. Simon Sinek is a great workbook. And we talked a lot about finding your why, finding your center. There is mission, but having a definite chief aim is the thing you should be focusing on. And to fuel that, to spark that definite chief aim, knowing your why is so, so important. I'm going to leave you guys with that this morning. I'm going to leave you with the mantra or the affirmation: do not go into that gentle night of mediocrity. Do not go into that general night of passivity. Do not go into that general night of being neutral. State clearly what you want. State clearly what you need. State clearly of what you desire for those around you and society. Let people make their own choice. We think there's safety. We think people will stay with us if we be neutral. We think people will stay with us if we don't push too hard. You don't need that. You should rage against the dying of the light, the dying of the spark in your soul, the dying of the fire in your belly, the dying of the passion that rages and raged for a long time when you were young. Rage against the dying of the light. I love you guys. Have a fantastic day. Ignite lives of explosive significance today. But please start with your own.